This is happening now. Capricorn is in the calm before the shift. Before you try to understand what this is, slow down for a moment. Not to analyze, not to confirm anything, just to notice. Notice the way your body feels right now. The stillness or maybe the subtle tension that never fully leaves. Notice how some messages don't arrive loudly. They arrive quietly, almost unnoticed, and yet they linger longer than expected. You didn't find this by accident, and this isn't happening later. It's happening now. There are moments when life lowers the volume before it changes direction. Not everything announces itself with movement. Some shifts begin with a pause so subtle that only those who live inwardly recognize it. If you feel unusually calm, detached, or less reactive lately, don't rush to label it. This isn't emptiness. It's not confusion. It's a space being created. A holding pattern. A quiet alignment that doesn't need explanation to be real. Most people mistake this phase for stagnation. They assume nothing is happening because nothing is visible. But you've learned that what matters most rarely starts on the surface. It begins internally, where decisions are made before actions ever appear. You may have noticed your attention pulling away from things that once demanded energy. Conversations that no longer interest you. Reactions that no longer feel necessary. This isn't withdrawal from life. It's awareness recalibrating. This calm isn't passive. It's deliberate. Some changes require silence to take shape. They require space. They require you to stop pushing forward so something more precise can settle into place. That's why this phase feels different from others you've experienced. There's no urgency, but there is certainty forming underneath. If this message feels less like information and more like recognition, pause with that feeling. You don't need to name it. You don't need to share it. Recognition is enough. And if this message reached you at the exact moment you needed to hear it, stay with this space. This calm has a purpose. And what comes after it doesn't rush. It arrives. Not everyone experiences this calm the same way. For some, stillness feels empty. For others, it feels uncomfortable. For you, it feels familiar, almost structured. There has always been something different about how you move through moments like this. While others look outside for signs, you instinctively turn inward. You don't rush to interpret what's happening. You let it settle first. You observe the shift before you give it meaning. This phase doesn't feel dramatic to you because drama was never your language. You've never needed chaos to validate change. You sense movement long before it becomes visible. You recognize when an internal line has been crossed, even if nothing external confirms it yet. That's why people often misunderstand you during this time. They assume silence means disconnection. They think calm means indifference. They mistake your lack of reaction for lack of depth. But what they don't see is the amount of processing happening beneath the surface. You feel everything. You just don't broadcast it. Your emotions don't spill outward. They organize inward. Love becomes quieter, but more precise. Pain becomes contained, but more informative. Awareness sharpens, not through urgency, but through patience. You may notice yourself becoming more selective now. Not colder, clearer. Certain conversations feel unnecessary. Certain expectations feel misplaced. Certain paths no longer deserve the energy they once received. This isn't rejection. It's refinement. There's also a subtle sense of being out of sync with the world around you. Others move quickly, react impulsively, chase immediate outcomes. You don't feel the need to keep pace. You've learned that timing matters more than speed, and even if you can't fully explain it, there's a quiet confidence growing. And knowing that this phase has visited you before. Each time it arrived before something meaningful shifted. Each time it prepared you to move differently, more intentionally. You don't need reassurance right now. You don't need validation. Your internal compass is active, steady, and clear. You trust what you're sensing because it has guided you accurately in the past. This calm isn't accidental, it's not random, and it's not permanent. It's the space where alignment forms, quietly, deliberately, before life responds. This calm didn't appear out of nowhere. It was shaped, slowly, deliberately, by everything you've already lived. There were moments when staying open cost more than anyone realized. Not because the pain was loud, but because it was constant. Small disappointments layered over time. Expectations placed on you that were never balanced. Situations where you gave understanding long before it was returned. You didn't break when those moments accumulated. You adapted. You learned when words were useless. When explanations only drained energy. When silence protected more than confrontation ever could. Each time something hurt, and you chose restraint instead of reaction, something inside you became more refined. Some endings were quiet. No arguments, no dramatic closure, just an internal recognition that something had reached its limit. You didn't walk away because you stopped caring. You walked away because caring without reciprocity slowly erodes you. There were periods of solitude that others might have called loneliness. But for you, they served a purpose. They helped you reorganize. They helped you regain balance. They reminded you of who you are when no one is watching and nothing is being demanded. You learned how to carry pain without letting it harden you. How to hold disappointment without letting it turn into bitterness. How to remain functional, steady, and composed while something deeper was being rebuilt beneath the surface. This is what most people never see. Your silence was never weakness. It was discipline. It was self-respect. It was construction. Every experience that challenged you added structure. Every betrayal clarified boundaries. Every moment of quiet endurance sharpened your awareness. Nothing was wasted. Even what felt unfair carried information that shaped you. You weren't being punished by life. You were being prepared. What once felt like endurance now feels like readiness. You're no longer reacting from old wounds. You're responding from alignment. The past has already done its work, and it no longer needs to speak. This calm phase isn't about pain repeating itself. It's about pain finishing its role. And as it settles, something solid remains. Clarity, restraint, and a strength that no longer needs to explain where it came from. There is a reason this phase changes how others respond to you, even if you haven't changed anything on the surface. Your presence feels different now. You don't fill space with words. You don't rush to be understood. You don't react the way people expect, and that alone creates tension for those who rely on noise, validation, or emotional control to feel secure. You carry yourself with a quiet density, not heaviness, depth. When you're still, it doesn't feel empty. It feels intentional, and that unsettles people who mistake movement for power. You don't argue your truth. You don't perform strength. You don't compete for attention. That kind of restraint exposes instability around you. Some people feel activated by your calm because it highlights what they haven't mastered within themselves. They sense that you're no longer available for emotional games, rushed decisions, or unbalanced exchanges. And when that realization sets in, dynamics begin to shift. You've probably noticed it already. Conversations change tone. Certain people pull back. Others test boundaries they never questioned before. Not because you became distant, but because your stillness no longer gives them leverage. Your strength doesn't intimidate through force. It unsettles through self-possession. You don't need to be dominant to be grounded. You don't need intensity to be firm. You don't need to explain why something no longer works. You simply stop participating in what drains you. This is where silent respect begins. Not the kind that is spoken. The kind that adjusts behavior. The kind that recognizes, often reluctantly, that access to you is no longer automatic. That your energy is contained, protected, and selective. Your love no longer depends on being needed. Your loyalty is no longer unconditional. Your patience is no longer endless. And because of that, people either rise to meet your level or quietly remove themselves. You don't chase either outcome. You remain steady. This is the power most people never learn how to hold. The ability to be fully present without being emotionally available to everything. Calm without passivity. Silence without weakness. Strength without display. You are no longer shaped by reaction. You are anchored by choice. And that anchoring is exactly what makes this phase so transformative, even if no one can quite explain why yet. At some point in this calm, something settles inside you with certainty. Not loudly, not dramatically, but clearly. It feels like an internal line being drawn, not out of anger, not out of exhaustion, but out of alignment. You don't announce it. You don't debate it. You simply stop offering parts of yourself where they are no longer respected. This is the moment most people never see coming. From the outside, you appear the same, composed, present, functional. But internally, a decision has already been made. Energy that once flowed freely is now conserved. Attention that once lingered has quietly withdrawn. You are no longer waiting for circumstances to change. You've changed your position. This isn't emotional shutdown, it's emotional precision. You recognize when patience becomes self-neglect, when understanding turns into tolerance of imbalance, when loyalty starts costing more than it gives back. And instead of reacting, you disengage, not out of punishment, out of clarity. You don't step back to create distance. You step back to protect structure. You've learned that access to your inner world is not a right, it's a responsibility. And once that responsibility is mishandled, you don't argue. You adjust. This is where the shift becomes irreversible. You stop reopening doors that were repeatedly mishandled. You stop explaining boundaries that were already crossed. You stop investing where alignment no longer exists. There's no bitterness in this, only calm resolve. People often sense it before they understand it. They feel the absence before they recognize the cause. By the time they ask what changed, the answer no longer needs words. The shift already happened. You're no longer available for what drains you. You're no longer flexible with what weakens you. You're no longer negotiable where it matters most. This is not escape. It's activation, not distance, direction. The calm you're in now wasn't meant to last forever. It was meant to bring you to this exact point, where restraint turns into choice and silence turns into alignment. And once that alignment locks in, you don't move backward. Not because you can't, but because you no longer belong where you once endured. You don't feel the need to correct anything anymore. And that, in itself, is relief. There is an order you've learned to trust. Not because someone explained it to you, but because you've watched it work. Again and again. Situations that felt unfair eventually revealed their truth. People who acted without integrity eventually carried the weight of their own choices. What once looked like loss quietly turned into protection. This is the invisible law at work. You no longer waste energy trying to balance what life already knows how to rebalance. You don't chase justice. You don't demand closure. You don't force understanding. You've seen how time exposes what words never could. And in stepping back, something important happened. You were freed. Freed from reacting. Freed from proving. Freed from carrying responsibility that was never yours. When you choose stillness instead of retaliation, you conserve power. When you choose silence instead of explanation, you preserve clarity. When you stop engaging in what drains you, life begins to reorganize around you. Quietly, efficiently, without resistance. This isn't passivity. It's wisdom earned through experience. You may notice now that outcomes no longer consume you the way they once did. You trust that what aligns will remain, and what doesn't will remove itself, with or without explanation. You don't need to witness consequences for them to be real. You don't need to be present for truth to surface. There's a calm confidence that comes with this understanding, a knowing that nothing meant for you can miss you, and nothing that harms you can stay. You stop monitoring what has already left. You stop anticipating what no longer matters. This is where peace becomes stable. Not because everything is perfect, but because you're no longer trying to control what was never yours to manage. You remain grounded. You remain aware. You remain unattached. And in that state, protection becomes natural. Guidance becomes subtle. Life responds not to force, but to alignment. The invisible law has always been moving. You simply learned when to stop standing in its way. There is something this phase is quietly asking you to acknowledge, not as a demand, but as recognition. You've been strong for a long time, not loudly, not visibly, but consistently. You became the one who holds, who stabilizes, who doesn't unravel when things become uncertain. And over time, that strength stopped being noticed and started being expected. But this message isn't here to ask more of you. It's here to see you. You've carried responsibility with discipline. You've chosen restraint when reaction would have been easier. You've stayed grounded when others needed you to be louder, faster, more flexible. That took effort. That took maturity. Even when no one acknowledged it, it shaped who you are. You are allowed to be tired without being broken. You are allowed to rest without losing your edge. You are allowed to stop proving that you can endure. Your value was never tied to how much you could carry alone. It was always tied to your awareness, your ability to move intentionally, to protect your inner world, to choose alignment over approval. There is nothing wrong with you for needing less noise now. Nothing wrong with you for wanting simplicity, depth, and honesty over constant stimulation. This isn't withdrawal. It's self-respect settling in. You don't need to harden yourself further. You don't need to close off what makes you perceptive and emotionally intelligent. What you carry is not a weakness. It's discernment refined by experience. Let this be the moment you stop measuring yourself by old standards. You're not here to sustain imbalance anymore. You're here to move forward with clarity, not weight. If this message feels personal, it's because it's meant to reach the part of you that rarely asks for recognition. The part that keeps going without applause. The part that understands silence not as emptiness, but as space. Allow yourself to receive that acknowledgement. No performance, no explanation. Just quiet recognition, the kind you've always understood best. There is one last thing to notice, not as an ending, but as a signal. What's happening now isn't the conclusion of this phase. It's the moment right before it becomes visible. When a real shift is approaching, life doesn't speed up. It slows everything down. Attention narrows, noise fades, old distractions lose their grip. You may feel less inclined to explain yourself, less interested in revisiting what no longer fits, less willing to move just to prove progress. That's not hesitation, it's timing. Be attentive in the days ahead, but don't become tense. No urgency is required here. Some situations may appear one last time, not to return, but to confirm what you already know. Some connections may drift without conflict, not because something went wrong, but because alignment has changed. What is leaving is doing so quietly. What is arriving is doing so carefully. This calm isn't asking you to act yet. It's asking you to remain present, to trust what you feel without forcing it into words, to allow clarity to finish forming before movement begins. And before you return fully to that silence, take one simple step. If this message reached you, support this space. Like this video and subscribe, not out of habit, but to stay connected to what's unfolding here. Some messages don't repeat themselves, they continue. If you felt this rather than understood it, write, "I felt it," in the I Ching comments. No explanation, no story, just acknowledgement. Stay close. This is happening now, and the shift doesn't need noise to be real.